The mainstream media have become the ministry of truth, or at least wannabes. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is another declaration of truth from your host, Terry A. Hurlbut. All right. You all heard Joe Biden's divisive, menacing September 1st speech. Only universal outrage could have done that speech justice, but that's not what we got. Oh, we got it, and in spades from the alternative media, but the mainstream media and some of its art house supporting organs offered universal praise for everything but the staging, and even that was a minor quibble and the subject of debate. There's a word that describes them now, but I won't repeat here. Let it suffice that that speech was a test of the media community. And the mainstream media failed that test. For that reason, I will make no further apologies or accommodations. I condemn the mainstream media as willing accomplices of a would-be tyrant. And I half expect the major organs to embed some of their reporters as war correspondents when bully boy elements of the United States Army or a real-life internal security force start rounding people up for imprisonment or execution, summary or otherwise. Before I begin my case against the mainstream media, I do want to shout out to the prime sponsor of this channel, which is Conservative News and Views, link in the description. And be sure to check the awesome CNAV Store. Scroll down near the bottom for that link. You will find lots of good merchandise there, especially this t-shirt that I have chosen for today, which reads, "Boy, did I call it or what?" Signed, George Orwell. And now, may it please the court and ladies and gentlemen of the jury, of public opinion, that is. Yesterday, as you know, I covered that speech, to which I've left a link in the description. I compared it to Cicero's orations against Catiline in form and in implication. The dire implication comes from Cicero's last major act as senior consul of Rome, having 5 Roman senators summarily executed. In this context, I want to mention the incredible sleight of hand Cicero used. A senior consul could not even recommend a penalty, so Cicero told the Senate that they would have grounds to propose summary execution. The motives of various senators to vote and even speak for execution don't matter. What matters is that Cicero gave those senators their prime excuse, and it must have been a good one, because execution without trial violated every concept of the mos majorum, the customs of the greater number. In fact, Senator Publius Clodius Pulcher, a few years later, proposed a bill of attainder to send Cicero into exile. He stated as his reason, Cicero's having Roman citizens executed without trial. If you go back and play yesterday's video, I explained what a bill of attainder is. Not only that, but in announcing the executions as accomplished facts, Cicero knew he mustn't utter the end-of-life word. And that today, that's the D word, but back then, it was the M word. So he said, they had lived, or in Latin, vixerat, pluperfect tense. Euphemism characterized Cicero's action, and similar euphemism characterized that speech. But more than that, Joe Biden issued a ringing call for glorious conformity. What might the late Rod Serling think of that? To his way of thinking, glorious conformity was a right-wing concept, not a left. But Joe Biden made it a left-wing concept, and no mistake. I now turn to the reaction. The best negative reaction, the control, came from Tucker Carlson at Fox News. Now, he wrote his piece the day before that speech, but he could as easily have written it after. His was a reaction to many things Joe Biden had already said before that speech. But if you take a closer look, you will find in that speech everything Tucker Carlson cited the day before. For instance, Biden said this to Morning Joe Scarborough on MSNBC. Quote, "Imagine, Joe, if you turned on the television in Washington, D.C., and saw a mob of 1,000 people storming down the hallways of the Parliament, breaking down the doors, trying to overturn an outcome of the election, and killing several police officers in the meantime. Unquote, Joe Biden. And yes, he said Parliament when he meant Congress, but that's a minor quibble, because I don't think he wants to change our system to the kind of parliamentary system they have in the UK or in the state of Israel. The larger point is that many of us, including, I imagine, President Trump, think the January 6th event was a false flag pseudo-operation, and not without good reason, though I leave it to you to decide whether it is with sufficient reason. I see Ray Epps famously exhorting people to go into the Capitol, and everybody shouted, Fed, Fed, Fed. Then, now you see him on an FBI wanted page, and now you don't. I have links in the description to 2 versions of that wanted page. A reporter for the New York Times admitted that the crowd was heavily salted with FBI informants, and he knew it. And he said that to Project Veritas, no less. I have links in the description to 3 videos. 2 from Project Veritas, the 3rd from Dr. Stephen Turley, discussing the matter. More to the point, no Capitol Police or other law enforcement officer met his end that day from a blow landed in anger. In contrast, one protester did meet her end from a bullet that an overzealous officer fired without cause. Tucker Carlson knows most of this, especially about the unfortunate end of Ashley Babbitt. And he fully expected everything we saw in that speech, except maybe for its staging. Here is how he closed. Remember a year ago? Stop the shouting, lower the temperature, unite our nation? That was last year. Not anymore, Nazis. They're taking off the velvet glove, and you're about to feel the steel beneath it. Unquote, Tucker Carlson. Well, Biden did take off the velvet glove in that speech. After that speech came several theories from the alternative media. Well, before I discuss those, I want to shout out to a sponsor who can really help you through the economic storms to come. That sponsor is oursilverlines.com. Do you feel like you're working harder for your money just to get by? You're not alone. The fluctuating economy, employment issues, sudden changes in life have left many families struggling over the past few years. Collecting gold and silver can help shield you against many of these challenges. But if you're like me, so many years ago, you don't know where or how to start. Our Silver Lines can help you by connecting you with thousands of members who are learning the secrets in creating and protecting true wealth by collecting precious metals. Now, maybe you just want to collect some rare and unique coins, or you can take advantage of certain business opportunities that company provides. Either way, they can help you learn to live an exceptional life. Visit oursilverlines.com to learn how you can build a legacy for your future. Now, did Joe Biden agree to give that speech as a desperate measure? He sounded angry enough to want to give a speech like that, but did he or his handlers do it out of desperation? Are his fellow Democrats in the House of Representatives so scared that they begged him to pull a stunt like this? Did he or someone else let his anger cloud his judgment, especially with the staging? Has Joe Biden taken alarm because Republicans have openly teed up plans to impeach him? Or, as J.D. Rucker warns, did Joe Biden deliver that speech as an ultimatum? Does anyone remember this line by voiceover actor Paul Frees in Colossus, the Forbin Project from 1973? Obey me and live, or disobey and... Well, you get the idea. Now, do Joe Biden's handlers have a plan in place to declare martial law? Maybe another false flag pseudo operation that will give the president an excuse to declare it? That warning assumes that enough rank and file in the Army would go along with it. And how many Marines? Is that why Joe Biden had 2 Marines in the background? I have a link in the description to J.D. Rucker's podcast in which he set forth his suspicions and the grounds for them. In sharp contrast, we see the mainstream media shouting hip hip hurrah and tally-ho. First, we see CNN saying that it's too bad a president should have to give anything like that speech. Worse, they justify it. The Times, they say, call for it, and they make much of Trump's promise to pardon fully all who now languish in prison on trumped-up charges, forgive the pun, arising out of the January 6th event. As far as CNN is concerned, and I'm not talking about their attitude, not their words, all such people should rot in prison for life without the possibility of parole, if they don't actually rate execution. Beyond that, CNN hopes voters will forgive the mess Biden has made of the economy to save democracy. And I'm sure I need not tell you that our country is not a democracy at all, but a constitutional republic. We have democratic elections, but certain laws do not change, and that's what makes a republic. The Atlantic leads the supporting cast, chiefly of glossy leftist magazines. They headline their piece, "The Speech No President Should Have to Give." They do quarrel with the staging, suggesting that it played into Trump's hands, especially that red light backdrop. Beyond that, they wonder why Biden did not specifically call on rank-and-file mainstream Republicans to rise up and loudly denounce Trump as a strutting pretender and all his followers as deluded, vindictive soldiers of insurrection. But beyond that, they say Biden had the duty to give a speech like that. The author of that piece makes an interesting criticism of Biden's touting of his legislative achievements. The Atlantic seems to think he should have left those out, but only because they detracted from focus. Biden needed to focus on the danger from Trump and his voters. Vanity Fair tells Republicans to shut up and take a large dose of the truth. Stop threatening democracy, they scream. Oh, that word. Not including that speech, but in cheering it before reviewing it. The New Yorker also cheers on the tone of that speech, though perhaps they too quarrel with the staging. Their quarrel is that the staging detracts from the words. More to the point, the editors of the New Yorker are very much afraid that Trump will win. What will follow, they say, will be their impression of Vladimir Putin's Russia. The Guardian gives a few cheers, saying much the same as the New Yorker did, but at least pretending to be neutral. Yeah, they're more subtle. But they express fear that Doug Mastriano would win his governor's race in Pennsylvania and appoint a Secretary of State that would change election procedures in that state. MSNBC actually praised Biden for having the Marines in the background, which CNN didn't like, by the way. MSNBC they denied that having the Marines broke with speech-making traditions, but that did not mean that they considered that normal. Instead, they said Biden deliberately had the Marines present to show that the American military will back Biden up. Now, back him in what? MSNBC would have us believe to back him against another insurrection. But maybe Biden means that the military will back him in martial law and rounding people up. Now, of course, neither MSNBC nor any other mainstream media organ will dare say that. Last, we have the Associated Press, whose editors can't seem to make up their minds whether to praise Biden for saying what they themselves think or warn that he disturbed a hornet's nest without good cause. They quoted Larry Diamond, a Hoover Institution fellow, as saying Biden faced a choice between two equally unpleasant alternatives. Diamond actually called the prospect of a Republican win in midterms an important challenge in the defense of democracy. There's that word again. But he also observed correctly that too many, from his point of view, will see that speech as partisan. That speech is more than partisan. As I told you yesterday, this is Cicero against Catiline type stuff. Dictators make that kind of speech before they send the internal security forces to round up their ordinary folk opposition and haul them off to prison, or to the gallows, or the guillotine, or the wall, or the gurney. When Whittaker Chambers read Atlas Shrugged and said that from every page he saw a command to a gas chamber, go, he could have been talking as easily about that speech. But not one voice in the mainstream media noticed, or if any of those writers and editorialists did notice, they buried that impression. Instead of sounding any alarm from that speech, they cheered it on, continuing the government's otherization campaign. They behaved as if they were actually the Ministry of Truth, read propaganda in an authoritarian country. And maybe some of those editors are preparing their curricula vitarum for Senate confirmation hearings for the post of Secretary of Truth. And by the way, curricula vitarum is the correct plural for curriculum vitae. And I assure you that when you are preparing for a Senate confirmation hearing, no mere resume will do. You must submit a curriculum vitae, a complete list of every possible reference from your life. In any case, the mainstream media can no longer claim membership in that press the First Amendment exists in part to protect. They have become part of a government, the chief executive of which made a dictator's speech. That is the final shame to their prestige, and reason enough to treat them as the Irish treated Captain Boycott, and for the same reason. Hey, go see the movie with that title, and in the very last line they'll tell you that's where the verb to boycott came from. Links to the description of the article, to that speech, to the now you see him, now you don't pictures, to the videos with and about the New York Times reporter who said there were FBI informants in the crowd, and it wouldn't even be that big a deal from what he saw and experienced, to J.D. Rucker's podcast, and to Conservative News and Views. I've also left a link to the awesome CNAV Store and to oursilverlines.com, as I also mentioned. And if you like what you've heard, you can like this video, click the bell icon to get more notices as soon as I put out another video. You can also click on the super thanks icon. It's a heart shape with a $sign inside it, and literally leave me a tip. And on the end screen, I'm going to leave a subscribe link and links to those 3 videos I mentioned from Project Veritas and Dr. Steve. This is Terry A. Hurlbut delivering another declaration of truth and reminding you to let the truth set you free.